was a wonderful introduction. I think we are at an interesting time. The topic is loaded. I'm saying interesting, and also it's a challenging time. DEI world over is kind of being threatened with the kind of regressive policies that are coming in from different countries, and also the political polarization that is happening all over. Now, the rising tide, is a tsunami coming? unlocking, unlocking kind of new potentials, right? What does it mean? Who has locked it? Why is it locked? How do we unlock it? Of course, I know somebody must be thinking that it's all you men there, right? So we'll get to the topic. Before that, I think let me put out the because, like I said, because of what's happening with DEI today, this topic is not just timely but also more crucial in terms of what we are going to discuss today. Now, before I get to the topic and get to the panelists in terms of questions and how we address it, let me put out some statistics. AM Research and in association with Chubb is going to release DEI in India report today. And some of the brief statistics, let me just point it out. The percentage of women in workforce increased from 29% in 2024 to 32% in 2025. DEI policy adoption increased from 68% in 2024 to 75% in 2025. Great. We are making progress, but not everything is good. Diverse hiring declined from 33% in May 2024 to 29% in February 2025. And that's further likely to reduce to 28% by the coming May. Now, with that topic, let me open up the discussion and ask Chandini to kind of open up who should be held accountable for this lesser percentage and how do we bring that change or what must change?
Prabhu, I'm very glad that you started with statistics because I'm an engineer and I love numbers. Okay, so I'm very glad. And you brought an interesting point. You said that female participation in workforce grew in 1995 from 25 to somewhere around 32% in 2025, right?
29% in 2024 to
32%. So yeah, it's a 4% growth in 50 years, right? Yeah, we've made progress, but that progress is clearly not huge enough, right? And I'd like to add some numbers that I was reading about last week, and this is International Women's Month, so all this stats and data is across our news feeds right now. If you see the C-suite roles, right, the leadership roles that we have across the globe and in India, the global average today for C-suite roles stands at about 30%. Now, you know the global average? Let's compare that to India. India's C-suite role is about 19% of the women in India are at C-suite roles, which is again, you know, this is something for us to go back and think about, that this is a country of 1 billion people. 48% of these people are women. 19% of these people hold the C-suite leadership role. And I'm saying C-suite, right? So this is not the peak. I'm not talking about CXOs. You take this further up to the CXO role, the global average is somewhere about 5 to 6%. And if you were to look at 500 top Indian companies, ladies, 1.6% of these companies are led by Indian women. So this is something really for us to think about in perspective and see what's going wrong. So there is clearly the broken rung, and that's the topic for today, right? The broken rung. So the stats prove it, the numbers prove it, the numbers don't lie. There is a broken rung, and like you said, that the participation at the entry level is at about 32%. What happens after that? There are biases into play, unconscious bias. Beyond that, there is, Suchi was talking about motherhood, right? And I have been a recent mother. I have a toddler 2.5 years old, and like she was saying that your work is easy, your job is easy. No one comes and teaches you how to be a good mother. It's the most challenging role that you can play. And if you don't have the right ecosystem, this is what happens. 24% of women drop out of work after having their first child. So they were 32%, you have lost 24% out of that. And then, you know, when you're growing up, you have to further swim the tide and fight the male blueprint to grow to the leadership roles. So that's even tougher.
With that note, I'll also take it a point as to, there is a lot of expectations, right? How do we address this challenge? I'll take it to Aditi. If you can kind of put it out to, is there an expectation that is set? Like, what is that? And then are women expected to behave like men? And that itself is questionable. So if you can talk about that.
Sure, sure. I think we also discussed this off the stage that, we talk about do women need to lead like men? But I want to even question what does leading like men mean? That itself is a stereotype which both men and women have to, live up to for some reason, right? The definition of, leading like men is something that has maybe been relevant for a time and phase when, there were more men in the workforce, the kind of work that you had required people to be on the ground, a certain set of characteristics of a leader were, figured out, and those characteristics were more, say, manly characteristics. But I don't think that is the case anymore. I mean, how many of us are actually doing jobs where we are actually going to battlefields or, mines? We are actually in a corporate office, right? Most of us are sitting behind a desk. So the characteristics have changed. So hence that notion of leading like men has to be questioned. And that has to be questioned, I think, at all levels, right? Starting from the time somebody, an induction happens for somebody who joins in, right? I always feel like that's the time where you have to change the mindset. And it is a responsibility of every company, it's a responsibility of every leader who exists, each one of us, to change that mindset from that point. Otherwise, Chani mentioned, it's such a unconscious bias or subconscious bias. It's very difficult to change it later, right? So you have to nip it at the bud. You have to nip it at the school level, at the college level, at the induction level in companies, right? And that's the way to change the perception that you need to lead like men, both for men and women, is what I feel.
Right. Thank you for that. At least in this panel, we have diversity. The world over it might be different, but at least here we have. So with that note, I'll go to Pavit. How do you what are the expectations that has been set, and then how do you look at that change?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, right? So I'd like to have two parts to it. So, just want to go back to history. If you look at us as an evolution, human evolution, right, till about 1920s, we were still a dynasty based world, right? We had kings, queens, leaders ruling the world. Then in 1920, 1930s, we had the Industrial Revolution, which is still predominantly a manufacturing setup where you had more male going out and working. And now, only recently, the tech world has come into the picture, right? And it's about 50 years old, right? 1970s, 1980s, you see the tech world coming up and rising, right? So that's one aspect of it. So we are evolving, right? It's not that we are not evolving, but are we evolving at the pace that we should evolve is a big question, right? And I completely agree. We do this when, as leaders, we have women who come up, then they go take a maternity break, for example. They lose out about 6 months to a year in the career, right? Then they have to play catch up, right? Then there is unequal payment because they lost out for a year in the entire society. Then when we have men going out and having get-togethers, right? We don't take into account that there is a lady in the group who needs to be accommodated. In fact, yesterday we had a catch-up, right, as a group, as gentlemen. And then all gentlemen are catching up after working hours. We were hanging out till about 10, 11 o'clock in the night and discussing everything under the sun. But can we expect a lady to be a part of the group? It's a little difficult, especially if she's got a family to take care of, right? It's a given that a lady will go back home and take care of her kids, right? While a guy sits at office and after office hours and goes for golfing sessions or goes for trekking sessions or goes for drinking sessions, right? And then gets along, and then that's when the networking happens. And these are the opportunities that women are losing out in their career. That's an important aspect that we as leaders have to consciously abide and understand. These are facts that we need to focus on to ensure that they become part of the group. And when they start becoming part of the group, that's when the networking, that's when the mentorship happens, right? A lot of decisions happen off the conference rooms. It happens in the dinner tables. It happens in the golfing sessions, right? And this is where women have to be part of it. Either we bring them there or we do something that helps them be part of this ecosystem, right? And that's where the challenge is today, and we understand that, and we're trying to see how we can evolve it. Also, as a startup, there's also another challenge that, bigger firms have gone ahead and have a lot of policies in place to drive this, but I'm currently working with a startup. We are so focused on driving numbers, right? We're so focused on getting revenues that we are not thinking about other challenges, right? We're not thinking about diversity. So, and then by the time we become too big, we realize that, oh, somewhere we missed the bus, that we should have focused on diversity, right? And then we start driving policies, but it's already too late. Then we are, driving policy at a senior level. It's not getting implemented at a junior level. So these are things, the challenges that come up, right? And
I am glad that you said that. And again, I am an engineer. I love my numbers. So I'll keep bringing numbers back to the table. Sorry for that.
I think she's been waiting. The moment you said women spending at home and then you going out for a different job. Do you have a point there? I think you wanted to kind of be a critique on that line.
Yeah, no, exactly, right? So the unpaid contribution of women to the society, we need to have a fresh perspective about that. Really, it's not about the work that you do professionally that contributes to the GDP and success of this nation. And I think there was a research done a few years back by some credible sources, and it said that if you were to put a number to the contribution that women do, and it's about $17 trillion, right? A man is able to go back and work successfully because she's doing the unpaid labor and not even getting enough credit for it. So please, can we also start looking at it from a fresher perspective? And coming back to my another numbers, there was a research done last year by McKinsey. They studied about 1,000 US companies, and what they found was that the companies that had a better diversity ratio was 25% more profitable than other companies. And when you bring other perspectives of diversity into this mix, race, LGBTQ++, these numbers grow back to 36%. So it's not a moral responsibility, it makes economic sense.
Yeah, on that note, I think a couple of years back there was a discussion, right? Husbands need to pay their wives for the unrecognized work at home. Now, I think offline we were discussing, so probably we should send a proposal to Nirmala Sitharaman and address this issue. And Pavit had a point on that.
As long as I get a tax rebate, I'm more than happy to share my profits with my wife, right?
Yeah, so is that a fair request? So let's also talk about on that line, I'll go to Snigdha on that. Let's talk about the male allyship. How do we kind of embrace this? It's not going to happen without the men addressing the kind of gender divide, right? So if you can take it forward from there.
Sure. So I think a lot of good points made. One thing that I believe is very fundamental is conditioning, right? Essentially, it's the conditioning we have since childhood that builds mindsets, and mindsets drive behaviors, right? So we can put a lot of great words and bring up these concepts, but very simply put, I think several of us would have grown up seeing allies or non-allies at home, and then what is the impact, right? So folks, they could be parents, they could be brothers, they could be close friends, they could be cousins or whatever, but that's where I think it needs to start, right? As in our personal life, as parents or as girls, I think it is important to call out and help males, understand there are no stereotypes, right? There isn't a work that's supposed to be done by a guy or supposed to be done by a girl. And as and when people need to fit into those roles, right, without stereotypes. I think if this is basically done right, at corporates, you have people who understand the pain that the women at home go through, fathers who have daughters and who obviously are ambitious about their daughters' careers. They are able to identify, observe the biases at work, and they are definitely more empathetic. And today, because of a lot of these programs and discussion around male allies, there are opportunities for men to express themselves and to make a difference, right? So in my own personal career, I am really grateful for, some of the male colleagues I've had. So remember, while my kids were still growing up, I decided to pursue executive MBA from ISB. And I still remember the orientation. They said, you will need, almost like 50 hours to kind of complete your course, because this is going to be done. It's a 2-year course that's going to get completed in 15 months, right? And I think that kind of scared me because I was already running a large role in my company, and then picking up this, I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing. But during the orientation, they also told us this is also the time when you learn to delegate, when you let go of the urge to be perfectionist, and you let others step in and step up. What you will find going back to your office, you're going to have an extremely capable set of leaders who are going to step up and take your work, and you will find a new talent, and you'll be able to expand and grow your responsibilities. And that's exactly what happened. My male team members, they found the gap, and the more I let go, the more they picked up. So today I turn back. I think, of course, my husband at home, my son at home. I'm just talking with the males at home. The women, of course, were there. It wasn't just them, right? I attribute that I could do my MBA because of these male colleagues who didn't think whether they were being male allies, right? The system just flowed through naturally. There was an opportunity, they stepped up, they helped me, and obviously that led to their growth.
Right.
Right, so I think that's what it is, I think, on the male allies.
Yeah, so I'll take it from there. If you can highlight in terms of much starts at home, right? So in terms of male allyship, the support system at home, and as long as men don't preach women what to do, how to do, and bringing that equality and equitable kind of talk at the home discussion.
So I could relate to everything that Snigdha said, and for me also the journey started at home, right? And my father has been my biggest role model, my biggest sponsor, my biggest teacher. He was a businessman, but he would take me to business meetings in a tier 2 city like Kanpur. I didn't expect that, but that gave me so much perspective now in hindsight. It made me better at negotiation. It made me better at how to deal with people. My husband, I have a 2.5-year-old, and like Snigdha, I also did my executive MBA from IMB. And doing that with a job, going back to your studies, investing time in your upskilling is hard. So you need to find that support system, and it often starts at home, extending to work. So another thing that I want to add is, at work, something that really helped me and powered my growth was sponsorship. So if mentorship is good, but to my male colleagues and counterparts and female colleagues and sisterhood, if you can not just be mentors, but can be active sponsors in the lives of women and help amplify their voices when you see them struggling. Not just be part of these panels, but really advocate for equal pay, equal opportunities. That is one thing I feel can be really helpful at work, beyond what we are already doing. So we've come a long way, but yeah, we have to still go a mile.
Yeah, so that requires a lot of women to kind of step up, and then it's a great expectation that one looks at, right? So taking to that, Aditi, I mean, I just want to ask, if you are kind of soft, you're looked at as weak. If you are kind of being bold, you're looked at as aggressive in any corporate world. How do you see this, and how do we address this?
Yeah, I think this is a fundamental problem that we've always seen, that women, especially women leaders, are expected to be likable. But then if you're likable, then there's also the perception that you're not assertive enough, or people can walk all over you, which means you have to be assertive. But if you are very assertive, then you are, like we used the word earlier, we discussed bossy, right? So I think the way I look at it is, again, I would take a step back and say, not just for women, but I put the perspective of, when you talk about skill sets, right? I think we have to look at the nuances, right? We can't all put everything in one bucket and say, hey, you know what? These are the skill sets that, were required to be a leader in the yesteryears. It's no longer the case. I think the nuances are that there are still some skills that are important even today. For example, is being decisive important? Whether you are a man or a woman, it is, right? Is being, is having a risk-taking ability important? whether you're a man or a woman, it is important. I don't think any gender can shy away from some of these skills or these traits if they really want to succeed and become a leader. However, do you need to be less likable and just be, let's say, an alpha, the way it's defined, to be a leader today? Probably not, right? So that's where I think the important thing is that all of us have to, A, reflect what are those qualities that are required and what are the qualities that maybe are no longer required, and be conscious about those. There is some research that I read recently which says that for leadership positions, men are often, selected for leadership positions on the basis of potential, but women are generally, selected on the basis of past performance, which itself is a bias, right? So as a woman, you are supposed to be proving yourself first, almost, before you can take on the next role, right? Whereas for men, a lot of, faith is given on potential. So there, I think, again, a balanced approach is required. Neither one of them work. Just potential is not enough, nor is there a need for you to, I think earlier, we heard Suchi, who also said that there is a need for you to take the next level of role. How will you take that if you're always judged on the basis of your past performance alone, right? So I think that's the outlook I have, that A, look at nuances, and then kind of, the world has to change, but we also have to change accordingly. Do I have to be an alpha to be a leader? No. But do I have to be decisive? Do I have to take risk? Yes. Right? And then stand by those principles, stand by those traits, no matter whatever the world tells you. Right? I think that's the approach I would take.
Right. Sneha, do you agree to that? And in terms of, do we need to relook at the leadership within the organization? At the entry level, I think the stats showed that at the entry level you have 46% women, but at the leadership level, perhaps 1/5 or 20%, 19% that comes in. How do we address that gap, and why that gap exists? Because if we don't promote women, or if we don't encourage them at the leadership level, perhaps that is where the gap is widening.
Yeah. So I think there's two questions baked in that. Do you agree with her? Of course, full-heartedly, right? I think leadership by itself, I think traits, requirements are changing. I think there's a lot more focus on empathy, collaboration, bring your authentic self to work. And I think that kind of comes with no disrespect, but I think that comes very naturally to women, right, as nurturers. I think there is a more fundamental problem, and this hopefully answers your follow-up question. I think the fundamental problem is, how do we perceive ourselves? Are we comfortable with ourselves, right? It's finally a mind game. If I want to think my being soft is a disadvantage, is a weakness, that's the vibes I'm going to give people in the room. If I am confident in who I am, and I'm also aware that as I grow up the corporate ladder, it's not the technical outcomes, it's not your quality outcomes, it's not your innovation outcomes, but there's a whole set of different skills that you need to develop. How do you influence people? How do you negotiate, right? How are you able to navigate through organization hierarchy? How are you able to smash into the boys' club, right? And probably build something that's a more gender neutral or more inclusive club, right? And what I feel happens is, women tend to get into this perfection syndrome. I mean, I hate the tagline of superwoman. I think that actually beats ourselves to death. There is no superwoman. I am, as failure prone as any other individual in this world. So first, let us not have unrealistic expectations of ourselves. Let's accept ourselves, but let's also understand, to be successful, it's not about these hardcore tangible outcomes that get measured, but there's a whole lot of different kind of skills, leadership skills, that need to be built, and you need to expose yourself to failure. So risk-taking, decisiveness, you don't only need it at your work, you need it at your home, right? You need to be assertive at home. And these are crucial skills for success, right? So focus on it. I know we have a paucity of time because we are playing multiple roles, but hey, you know what? Just sit back and observe your conversations with your mother-in-law, with your father-in-law, with your child. You're actually really building those skills at home. Just the fact is you're not connecting it, because for women, I think while we are great at multitasking, we try to compartmentalize things. Oh, there is this guilt feeling. I have to give time at home. Hey, but you know what? I'm building skills that are fungible across. So to your question, I think you forget about the leadership definition. Be very mindful of what's helping succeed in your organization today. Tomorrow, a different organization may have different cultures, may promote or incentivize different behaviors. You have to adapt. So resilience, adaptability, mindfulness, and wanting to change yourself and accept change, accept yourself, I think are the key things that you just have to live your whole life with.
Right. I think let me go to Pavit and then bring that male perspective to this. So, if you can add on to that, women in tech or women generally expected to do the office plus that housework that comes in, right?
True.
How do you see it, and how at the organization, being a leader, that you address it?
Excuse me. Yeah, so just going back to some stats I was reading last week. In fact, I think Times of India published it. Women in general, and this covers just not Tier 1 city, right? We need to look at Tier 2, Tier 3 cities also, because Chandini is an exception. We had this discussion before. I think the support that she got being in a Tier 2 city is something that we don't see women getting that across, right? So I'll come to the second point later.
I've been very lucky in that, and I hope that we can find people that makes everyone lucky, in the sisterhood. So I'm glad that, we have male perspective to this.
Okay, interesting. So what I was trying to say is that women in general do about 6 hours of household work at home compared to men doing only 20 minutes, right? And then so what's happened is we are so, as I said, unconditionally biased that, a woman will take care of office, household work also. It's a given because she does that at home, right? So she's going to do that at office. And then somehow she does that, and then we don't value it because it's not built in our KPIs or KRAs. We're like, that's a given. She does it every day in, day out, so it's part of her nature, so she'll do it, right? So this is something that we want to change, and it's an subconscious bias. Yes, it happens. Also, women are just discussing another couple of things. We had 2 ladies in the team, junior ladies who joined the finance team. They're doing very well with us. Unfortunately, they had to get married. And then they decided to leave work and go and settle down in a Tier 2 city because their husbands are from Tier 2 city, right? So I was like, I politely asked them, but you're doing well in your career, why don't they move here? That's the expectation. So women generally are giving, and that's how we've been brought up, right? That women give, you sacrifice for the family and you move ahead. There's nothing wrong with it, but it has to be a balance, right? So when my wife and I got married, right? So before marriage, I was in Mumbai, she was in Bangalore. So I said, you come to Mumbai. She said, no, hell no, I'm not coming to Mumbai. You come to Bangalore. Right? It's your choice. Either you take it or leave it. So I said, okay, I'm coming back to Bangalore. So I moved back to Bangalore, right? So yeah, it's an important aspect that we have to consciously drive it, right? And organizations have to drive it. And I think there's some amount of government support that is required for us. Because if you go back to Europe, right? If you look at Europe and a lady goes on maternity leave, the government sponsors her paid leaves for about a year or something like that. Where in India, it's up to the organization to sponsor that for 6 months. Government doesn't step in, right? And for a smaller organization, it starts hurting somewhere, right? They're like, oh my God, I'm paying for 6 months, now what, right? How do I don't know if she's going to come back after that to work, and it's an investment that I've done, who's going to give me an ROI or not. So I'm just telling, in finance, we start thinking about these terms, right? But if you go to a European nation, government supports these kind of movements, so the company is more relaxed. And India, if you look at it, predominantly is an SME-driven sector, right? We have new big MNCs coming up, but if you look at large, there's a lot of SMEs that are operating, and they need this support, right? So government has to do their bit to help organization understand and overcome this bias that we have.
Yeah, I think before we take on in terms of the closing remark, I want to address, because he spoke about Tier 1, Tier 2, all of that. Of course, putting KRAs and KPIs to the housework is going to be problematic. I disagree with that. So if you can talk about in Tier 2, right, how do we bring up the leadership in women? I mean, of course, Tier 2, we have great access. The kind of exposure that the women get is different. But moving beyond Tier 1, how do we address this?
Good question. So I think a lot of good perspectives added by Aditi and Snigdha and Pavit already. So I loved what Snigdha said, that you have to take the first step in your life. You have to be bold enough to break that barrier first yourself. And you have to have that confidence in you that you can break that barrier, right? So for example, for me also, when I started Prabhu, I come from a Sindhi conservative family. My family was in business. Women didn't go out to study. Neither did men, to be very fair, right? We were into business, right? But for when I said I wanted to go out of the city and wanted to study, a lot of my family members thought that it was a bold move. Right. For me, it was a non-negotiable step to shape my career, what I wanted to do. So you have to have that confidence in you to do that. Then in terms of, what, again, coming back to what roles do government play, do policies play, because this needs a 360-degree change. It needs a change in mindset. It needs a change at home. So how can we raise more awareness and education in those cities for girls to have that kind of exposure? I was exposed to business meetings, yes, and my family was supportive. How do we get that awareness and build that ecosystem for them to understand what opportunities lies? And finally, coming back to the question and the stats we started with, women in leadership, right? The pipeline is broken. How much, like we coming from 4 different orgs, what is our pipeline of women in leadership roles compared to the men? And if the pipeline is broken, how do we fix that pipeline? Can we introduce blind hiring policies? Blind promotions, like where genders and unconscious biases don't play a part. I know, Aditi, you've had an entrepreneurship stint as well, and I don't know how many women get the startup funding. Can funding be blind? I don't know. So those are some kind of things I'm looking at, and putting some accountability to it. I know there are a lot of D&I initiatives running. It's funded, but can they be tracked and measured? Just like we have KPIs on sales and marketing and engineering, code quality, etc. Can there be KPIs to the initiatives to measure the outcomes? How successful are those initiatives? So that's something that I feel is really helpful.
Thank you. I think we've had a wonderful discussion, but I'll take a closing remark from each one of them. Aditi, if we can start with, what are the boldest moves that the leadership could make to move forward, a forward-looking statement for our topic?
I think I'll add on, my statement will be an add-on to what Chandni said. I think build the pipeline, build the funnel, not just top of funnel, because top of funnel we are getting there, but the middle of funnel, bottom of funnel to leadership, right? If you need leaders, do you have the N-1s ready? Do you have the N-2s ready? I think that would be the move that we have to do as leaders, all of us.
Like that.
Sure. So while I believe in paying forward, and I think both of them have covered it beautifully, I think I believe in igniting the fire within. So whether leadership does or not, I think everybody in this room should be bold, break the barriers, and build an inclusive environment, right? If each one of us takes the accountability because each one of us needs it, I think we will not only do it for ourselves, but we will do it for all the women around us.
Thank you.
She's spoken exactly what I wanted to say, right? So it's important that you take a stand. Sometimes it might be, work in the right direction. Sometimes you might falter, but doesn't mean that you stop and give up, right? You have to pick yourself up again and go and try and achieve your goals. Otherwise, it's going to be an endless battle that you're going to keep fighting, right? So it's important. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Awesome. I think all these people have said everything that I wanted to say, and but I fully agree, and I hope that we can take it a level up, and that 19% gap can really be bridged to 25, 30%. And we have like smaller achievable milestones that we are working towards, just like we do in any other work. This is taken as seriously as that. That's what I'm hoping for. That it doesn't become another panel discussion during International Women's Day week, right?
Right. Just to summarize, right, like all of them have put across different thoughts. It's not just about, I think Snigdha spoke about being bold and then initiative taken by self. Pavit spoke about in terms of how do we address the kind of gaps in the industry and at organizational level. I think both of them, Aditi and Chandni, kind of spoke about how do we address this at home, right? I mean, it much starts at home, and there is much needed debate in terms of what the government can do at various from the educational level to kind of bring up policy changes that can enable us. So I think we've had a wonderful discussion. Going forward, I think we should probably, it's not just restricted to how women see gender diversity, but also for men to kind of relook at the way things are and then kind of promote that gender diversity. So that's all from our end. Thank you very much.